I was big my junior year. I was like
Tell everybody how big.
I was 260. And going to the area code, I got there. I'm playing infield, and the scout, I don't know his name, but he basically called me fat. That was one of the pivotal moments, early on in my career that kind of changed me. I didn't want to hear it, but I needed to.
Today's guest is Austin Riley. He's a former first-round pick in the 2015 MLB draft and the current third baseman for the Atlanta Braves. Austin is a two-time All-Star, a two-time All-MLB recipient, and a two-time Silver Slugger Award winner. He is not only one of the best players in Major League Baseball, but he's arguably the best human being in the game as well. Austin shares my desire to help educate the younger generation and their families for not only what they're currently dealing with, but also what lies ahead in the business of baseball. We had such a great conversation, and we covered a ton of ground, from how he balanced the demands of travel ball with his development to his college recruiting process. And we also discussed the new rules that impact college recruiting that were recently put into place by the NCAA. He also shares what made him realize he needed an advisor well before he was drafted, and the biggest adjustment he needed to make going into pro ball. Finally, Austin discusses what's changed for him since he signed the largest contract in Braves franchise history. Guys, this is an interview that peels back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes, but with a player that is just entering his prime. Get ready for countless pieces of advice for younger players looking to stand out. I hope you enjoy this conversation with my client and my friend, Austin Riley. So Austin, what is it like to actually be able to say, I am a Major League Baseball player? Like, I'm sure at some point that was your dream.
Yeah.
Right? To be able to actually say the words, I'm a Major League Baseball player. What is that like on a daily basis?
It's incredible. I feel like baseball is all I've known, throughout my life. And I think the coolest thing is just kind of looking back now that I've been in the league a couple years, is I've just seeing like the process that I went through, like to where, from, like I said, going back to T-ball days, to travel ball, to high school ball. And like now looking back at like how, you don't know what's going to happen at the time. And then, just seeing how that all kind of has laid out. I think it's been super cool. And like I said, being on a team, winning a World Series, it's been awesome.
Insane. Yeah. I think a lot of kids grow up, and I'm assuming you were the same, and tell me if I'm wrong, but a lot of kids grow up and they have these dreams and these ambitions. How old were you when you said to yourself, I want to be a Major League Baseball player? Was that?
I think it was, early teens, 12, 13.
Wow. So I would say that's actually kind of late.
Well, I say that, I think it was like, that's when I knew I really wanted it.
Got it.
I think, growing up, we used to play, we called it bunt ball in the backyard. It was like, you had the whole, you were drawing up the scenarios of 3-2 bottom of the ninth.
Uh-huh.
Of course it was like that. You were picturing those moments
Sure.
of like wanting to be a big leaguer. But I think, me personally, like early teens, 12, 13, when I really started to figure out the game and understanding myself that I was pretty good at it. I think that's when I knew. I was like, it would be awesome to be.
Right. So maybe before that you had the dream of being a big leaguer,
For
but
sure.
like, is it realistic?
Right.
Probably
I wanted
not.
to be a professional hunter. I wanted to
Right.
be a farmer. Like there was all different kinds of things that I wanted to do, but I think it wasn't until then when I was like, this is what
So early teens is when you started to kind of taste, all right, maybe this is something I can make my career.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And as a kid, obviously growing up in Mississippi, who's your team? Was it the Braves?
So it was between the Braves and the Cardinals. Obviously, I was a big Chipper Jones fan because I played infield, and then I was a huge Yadier Molina Pujols fan.
Yep.
Those were like, I bounced between those two, just watching them, and like I said, being able to make my debut, not trying to jump too ahead, like with Yachty behind the plate was the best thing ever. So
I love that.
Those were my three
I don't
players.
know that I even knew that.
Yeah. Like I know, I still to this day, I said something to him and I have no clue what I said. Zero clue. I think I was just in complete utter shock.
Right.
more mumbling than
I'd probably,
than probably anything.
100%.
Oh, that's funny. Did you brought up a couple players right there, but as a kid growing up, was there a player that you tried to emulate? Like, you know, the kid, you grab a bat and you're like, I'm going to do this guy today.
I think it was like the very extravagant batting stances from Kevin Youkilis to Gary Sheffield, just like this super bizarre, like how crazy can you get? Like stuff that like isn't natural. You know, I watched David Wright growing up, Scott Rowland, those type of guys. Like when I started gradually moving towards the third base position.
Yeah, because before that you obviously were a pitcher, but you played shortstop
and caught.
And you caught,
yeah.
right?
So I think that was a lot of the Yadier Molina was just, you know, growing up, I loved putting on catcher's gear. Obviously committed to Mississippi State as a catcher first before realized that, you know, I was going to be a pitcher infielder. So I think that's kind of how all that conspired.
Right, which we'll talk about the Mississippi State stuff. But before you obviously started, and we'll call it, again, to use your words, kind of early teens, when you figured out you wanted to be a big leaguer or felt it was realistic. Did you play any other sports?
Yes. I played basketball and football.
Until when?
So I stopped playing basketball. I played my freshman year in high school, and then I stopped. And then I played football all the way through till I was a senior, or through my high school.
And tell everybody the position you played, because I don't know how many people know this.
So I quarterbacked freshman, sophomore year, and then 7-on-7 was getting like super huge at the time. And like obviously I was playing baseball during the summer, and like all these 7-on-7 tournaments I couldn't be at, but I still wanted to be a part of the team. I actually went to my head football coach and tried to quit, like just straight cold turkey. And was like, hey, I'm not, after my sophomore year, it's like, hey, I'm just not going to play. And I think it was one of the best things that I could have done. He actually was like, hey, you don't have to play quarterback, but come and kick and punt and do all the kicking game. Cause my dad punted at Mississippi State, 2 springs with Detroit. So obviously, you know, at that point, from then on, I just kicked and punt my junior and senior year.
It's actually a common thing, I think, now so many parents and kids kind of go through is, you know, these sports are pretty much year round now, right? And I think one of the challenges is a lot of these families feel like, okay, we need to make a decision. We need to devote ourselves to purely one thing, because if, let's just say, you know, somebody's son is 15 years old listening to this, at 15 years old, if you don't prioritize now, then maybe call it 17 or 18. When you start to prioritize, are we now behind the 8 ball?
Yeah.
And I'm actually curious, do you feel like playing these other sports put you in a better position to be more successful at baseball, whether that was from the physical aspect, maybe a training component?
For sure. I 100%, like, I tell everybody that asks me that question, play them all.
Right.
Because you just don't know what's going to happen. And I learned a ton, you know, from basketball, just, you know, it's a team sport, you know, obviously, and just working with other guys and just like footwork from a footwork standpoint on the basketball court, to football. Just, I had a rough head coach, and just like he would hammer us all the time. But I think like I was able to grow from just a mental standpoint of like the mental toughness. Like nothing beats, like everybody asked me, what's your favorite part of like high school? I was like, Friday Night Lights was like the best. Just like being with the guys, and you know, obviously I like football. So I tell everybody that asks, I was like, play them all, because you just don't know. I learned a lot about myself in football and in basketball from just like different aspects. And I've been able to use them, you know, in the baseball world now, that I don't think I would have gotten if I would have just stuck to one sport.
Well, and I guess first question I have is, can you give me an example of maybe something that you learned in football, basketball?
Oh yeah. I think so. Funny. I think from a football standpoint of just like mental toughness, we were not good in quarterbacking, and I got beat up a ton. I think just like the physical toughness of taking hits and just like got to get back up and keep going.
Yeah.
And then along with, you know, I still remember this to this day. It was Thursday walkthroughs. We were on the field, just helmets, ran a play. I made a bad pass, and my coach absolutely lit into me. just like from a mental focus standpoint. He asked if I ate paint chips when I was younger. Like, just like I said, but it was just like being able to, I think I've used that going forward now is like the preparation, even the small things in the game, like you got to focus on those. And I think that allows you to take that next step to be better and elevate yourself.
Well, and I think so for parents who maybe feel forced to, have their kid only play one sport, I think it comes from a good place, right? It comes from them saying, you know what? We don't want to fall behind. We have to hurry up and make this decision. But what you're saying, and what I would agree with, is you have to let the kid develop how he's going to develop, because, not every kid is going to show that he's going to be great at this one sport called at 13. He may show it at 16. He may even show it at 18 or 19.
No doubt.
Right.
No doubt.
So let them go and develop. And number one, you're going to get the experience. Number two, you're going to be able to get this valuable knowledge, whether that's the mental side, the physical things that you're referencing. So
yeah, I just think you learn so much about yourself in those, like I said, especially those late middle school, early high school, like you're still growing, you're learning your body.
Right.
It's like just everything that can go into it. I just think it's only good.
Right.
Versus if you focus on one sport, you may, I think, I don't know why this came to my mind, but I think Tyler Glasnow said not too long ago where he grew like so many inches from like his sophomore to his senior year. And it's like, you don't know if you're going to grow.
Of course.
You just don't know. So it's like, do them all. And then, you may take a leap, and next thing you know, you may be the next star quarterback. You may be the next.
Well, there are plenty of examples of players who, speaking of baseball, didn't get drafted out of high school, who went to a junior college, and I'll use the name Evan Longoria, doesn't get a college scholarship, goes to a junior college, then gets a scholarship to Long Beach State, and then becomes, I think, the 3rd overall pick in the draft.
It's crazy.
So I think a lot of people, again, it's this fear of like missing out that forces them to say, we need to just figure this out.
Yeah.
And I would agree with you in saying, no, you need to let kind of time do its thing.
Yeah.
And over time, you're going to figure out really the pathway you need to take. Yeah. So going back to baseball. So do you remember how old you were when you first started playing travel ball?
I think it was 9. I think it was 9 years old, kid pitch. Once we started kid pitch, we started doing the travel. And it wasn't as, like, it was very limited. It was, if I'm not mistaken, it was a few tournaments here and there. But then once we started getting to 10, 11, 12 is when it kind of took off. We were playing a good bit of tournaments.
And the organization that you played with at the time, was it just a local organization?
Yeah, it was the Mississippi Royals.
Okay.
It started out as Mississippi Mustangs, went to Mississippi Royals. And it was all of my buddies, like still talk to them today. It was like a group of us. We pretty much played all the way through travel ball days together. I think it was just, I feel like I'm really lucky. One, have the friends that I was able to make, and two, some pretty good athletes. Like I think it's 6 or 7 of those guys that I grew up with ended up going Division I.
Really?
Yeah, it was, like I said, I think it was just, couldn't have drawn it up any better. Super lucky and fortunate enough to have a group like that. And like I said, we played all the way through pretty much together.
And so at, call it 8, 9, 10, you start going to some of these events. It sounds like it was all pretty much local.
Yeah.
When did things start to maybe elevate a little bit and you started to go to some national events? Do you remember when that was?
I don't think it was until, like, the first thing, like, real big event that I remember was we played in the Disney Wild World of Sports.
Yeah, in Orlando.
I think I was 12.
Okay.
Ended up, I think, coming in second, if I'm not mistaken. But that was like in my memory, the very first like long trip that we took.
And when these events started to happen, do you remember why? Was it you just got older, now it was time? Were your parents saying, we think you should do this? Were you saying, no, I want to go on these trips?
I think it was more of I think, like I said, we had a really good group and pretty competitive group. And I think we were I think it was more of like parents wanting to get us out there, play a little bit better competition than just right around the Mississippi area. So I think it was a little bit, and like I said, I loved it. Like I said, we did the whole Disney World experience, got to go there. It was my first time. So I think it was a little bit of both, But I definitely think, like I said, the parents kind of knew that the group that we had was pretty unique and like I said, pretty talented. So
right. So it was maybe about, you guys are so good, you're winning.
Yeah.
So let's go see how good we are.
I think so.
And
I really do think so.
Yeah. And it naturally took shape.
Yeah.
Got it. And do you remember, at what age would you say you started to kind of become a draft prospect?
You may know this better than me.
I might.
I think it was like so I committed to Mississippi State my sophomore year of high school. I would say like right around the ninth grade, late part of my ninth grade year.
And what was it that made you feel that way?
I was the only freshman on my high school team. I actually started as a catcher. Our catcher went down.
So are you playing varsity?
Yeah, I'm on varsity.
As a freshman?
As a freshman.
Got it.
And I caught the rest, the whole games my freshman year. And then, like I said, I think Mississippi State, I started to get some notice from some colleges. And then at that point, some pro scouts started to get involved a little bit.
So when you started hearing from the colleges,
yeah,
and maybe started seeing some of these pro scouts start to show up, even though that's really early.
Yeah.
Were they in town seeing some other player?
Yeah. So you had there were a few names like around the district that were getting some looks that were juniors and seniors. So I think that's kind of how that all came about. Is just like they were there watching them. And then, obviously being a freshman, I think I had a pretty good freshman year.
How many homers?
Can't remember.
I love that about you. Guy doesn't even remember.
I don't know who I faced yesterday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, like I said, I think it was just, that was when it started to really kind of take shape as far as like, okay, colleges, now pros.
Got it. The idea was planted at that point as a freshman. Did you have a big development jump from freshman to sophomore year, from sophomore to junior?
Not really. I think I started picking up like velocity starting like my sophomore year. Cause like I said, I committed to Mississippi State as a catcher my sophomore year. Obviously was still pitching some. And then, like I said, Carson Klepsick ended up going to Ole Miss as a catcher. He was catching. I was starting to throw a little bit. Velo was starting to get there. I was, 88, 90, 91, right around there my sophomore year. And that's kind of where that all, like I said, the pitching, like I said, went from catcher to pitcher.
Right. So at what point did you come off of catcher?
My sophomore year.
And why was that?
Because I was pitching.
Okay.
I was throwing the ball well.
And yeah, it doesn't make sense to be a catcher and a pitcher like that. Obviously
doesn't work.
That's not going to, it's not going to work.
So I think it was like I could pitch and still play position in the same game. Like I said, Carson was a great catcher behind the plate. Like he could handle it.
Yeah.
So whether I was playing shortstop, then I'd come in later innings or start and then go to shortstop. I think it was like me being more versatile with a really good catcher behind the plate.
Okay, question. And I think this is an important one. How did you handle, was it you and your dad or even your mom? Because I know your mom really well. Yeah. She's certainly capable of doing this. Who spoke to the high school coach, or was it the high school coach's idea to move you off the position?
So I wasn't the biggest fan of catching.
Okay.
So kind of backtrack. I had surgery on my left ankle my ninth grade year in the fall. And I just remember playing summer ball and like I ended up like my talus bone, I think is what they call it, never fused together. So I have 2 screws in my ankle. But catching, like it killed me catching in my ankle. And so I think the transition of like when I had the opportunity to pitch and play short, didn't have to get behind the plate, it kind of was like,
so
I'm okay with it.
It happened naturally.
Yeah.
You weren't fighting it. And it sounds like your high school coach was okay with it too.
Like I said, because Carson handled it, like he was great behind there. So it's just like, I think the situation in which the dominoes kind of fell, it just kind of all fell into place and
got it.
Out.
I have a question and I want your professional opinion on this. Let's assume for a second that you wanted to make this transition.
Okay.
Your high school coach didn't. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give a parent who has that situation present itself? A high school coach saying, no, I think you need to do this because it's better for the team.
100%.
And you have an opinion saying, no, what's best for me personally in my career is to move off this position.
I think, you listen to the coach. I really do. Because I think it's, to me, the team building and what's best for the team and whether or not, if it makes the team better with you behind the plate and you have guys that are able to handle the positions wherever you may want to go, I think that's what you got to do.
You're old school.
Yeah. Well, that's like, I remember guys that were in my high school that, transferred over, wasn't playing and immediately bounced.
Sure.
And it's like that to me, and I get the opportunities, you got to go get opportunities, but I think like the same time of like understanding it's team first.
Yeah. This is why people love you. Right. And the reason I said you're old school is I think the game lacks this a lot today is a lot of people are so individually focused and the only thing they care about
I'm going through it right now. I'm sucking at the plate right now, but we're winning ball games and I could care less.
Right.
Obviously I want to figure it out because I want to help my team win and produce. But at the same time, it's like, if we're winning ball games, that's all that matters. But it also gives me the luxury to figure my stuff out. And I think that's what's kind of, I think, lost in today's world. It's like, you got the bouncing around of transferring. It's like, learn to win, and you're going to get if you can help your team win and be valuable that way, I think you present yourself a better opportunity down the road.
Sure.
Than just bouncing around and, not being, whether you're not a good teammate, like you cause problems, that kind of thing.
That's a confidence thing for me.
Yeah.
Like you are confident in your abilities that you don't need to concern yourself with thinking, all right, wait a second. If I don't worry about myself, then I'm not going to get mine.
No.
Right. And you've always been that way. And that's what's interesting. A lot of people would say, listening to this, oh yeah, Austin Riley's this way now because he's got $212 million coming to him and like he's got nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
But you've always been this way.
I think that goes back to my parents. You know, like I said, I wanted to quit football. Obviously my coach didn't want me to. My parents were like, you've committed to this. And that my mom is like big on this.
Yeah.
Like summer ball workouts, football workouts, 7 a.m. workouts. Like it didn't matter. I was not missing it. It's like, I signed up for it. You're going to be committed. You're going to show up.
I love that.
And like I said, that definitely comes from my parents.
I love that.
Yeah.
There needs to be more of that for sure. So I'm going to come back to the college thing for a minute, but before that, so something that I've noticed over the last, I would say primarily more so in the last 5 years than anything, is what I'd call like a parent's importance hierarchy. So if you have a parent who's going through, call it travel baseball, right? And there's 3 components that they're really trying to juggle at all times. One is development, one is competition, and then the third is exposure. Something that I've noticed is a lot of the parents, they prioritize these things backwards. They put exposure as the most important thing, right? I need to get my son exposure because if he gets exposure, then he'll get the college scholarship or he'll get drafted.
Right.
And then, he's taken care of. The second thing for them is then the competition. And it's almost a result of the exposure. Like, well, the focus is exposure, so then he'll get competition.
Yeah.
And then the development piece for me, as I look at these families, it really just kind of floats around. It's kind of a priority, but there's really no strategy or direction behind it, like why they're doing what they're doing. And so I've always said the number one focus for me, and tell me if you agree, needs to be development.
No doubt.
If you focus on the development, it doesn't matter if you're 13, if you're 16, if you're 18. If you focus on the development and you do what you should do, the result of that will be you going out there and wanting to compete to show, look what I've been able to do.
Yeah.
And then the result of those two things is the exposure will come.
Yeah.
Right. Like you, even though you went to this event in Orlando, the Wide World of Sports one, you were young. It's not like that's where you got the exposure.
No.
It sounds like the exposure for you came from your own high school game.
Yeah.
Right? Being on a team with some other guys that were good or playing against some other guys that were good. And then naturally they saw how good you were.
No doubt.
And I think these parents need to know, and the game now, these scouts, if you're good enough, they will come find you.
100%.
Yeah.
Like and I totally agree with you. It's like today's age where everything's at the tip of your fingers. Like if you're good enough, you're going to be found. Like there's no question. So like I said, I do think the development is the number one thing, no matter what it is. And like, it kind of goes back to what I was telling you with playing all the sports. It's like, you get all those developments from 3 different sports. And to me, you doing that set yourself up better down the road than just focusing on one, because you've learned all these different aspects of the, different games,
right,
and what you may learn from basketball or football or whatever it may be. Then you like I said, then you're that much more ready to then take those steps to when the time comes for you to get the exposure, you kind of been able to handle that, and you know what to expect.
And as you look back on how you did things, who was, and maybe it was both your mom and dad, maybe it was a coach, who was kind of advising you before we met?
My dad.
Your dad?
My dad and mom, 100%. Dad for sure. He harped on me all the time about, kind of like that preparation development side. He still calls me to this day asking if I did my forearm workout.
I love it.
Like we had
Big Mike's a special guy.
Oh, there's no one better. And it was just like small things, like, I think you can do, technology is taking over the world. And like I said, I'm kind of an old school guy. It's like, the big 2 things that he focused on for me was making sure I stretched every night, and forearms. Like I had a rice bucket, and like those 2 things were like.
So you did both of those things every day?
Pretty much. Like we would sit, as many nights as I did not want to do it. He would always, like, right before bed, it's like, hey, let's sit on the ground, let's stretch for 10 minutes while you watch a hunting show, and then, we'd go through a rice bucket workout.
So how long was the rice bucket workout?
It was only like 5 minutes, but it was like 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, or 30 seconds on. Then you would like grab the rice and you flick it. Then you would, twist your hands in it. Like that's like what I remember growing up. It was like, it wasn't, get on the mound and throw a weighted ball as hard as I possibly could.
Right.
That's a whole nother gig I could get into. But I think it was just like more about developing like my body physically, and like understanding what it takes to stay healthy, and what works for me, and that kind of aspect. And I appreciate that from him.
I'm gonna have to interview him, because I actually want to know, like, why were those the 2 things? I wonder what was it for him.
Well, it was like stretching. Well, I think like a big part of him, like playing football, he stretched. Like, one, if you're, you see hamstring injuries, like flexibility, like staying limber, especially at third base, like staying mobile, like that's a huge part of the game. And then 2, like the whole Nolan Ryan, like with the, he used to have the story of him like rolling newspapers every day, like got his forearms like big, and like you use that a lot. And I think that's where that kind of, he would be a great one on this. Like,
you should have had it.
He would love it.
No, we'll definitely have him on. Big Daddy, I'll give you a call. Okay, so then I come into the picture at some point. Walk me through, what was the process like before you had an advisor? Did you know you needed one? Did mom and dad help you?
No, I think it was, I didn't even know what an advisor was. Obviously it was the point where I was obviously talking to colleges. It's like they couldn't call me, like I had to call them, that kind of thing. You're gonna have to refresh my memory as far as like, because it was Tim Doolin set it up.
Yeah. So we had a meeting.
We had
it
breakfast.
Was me. Yes. And it was me, you, your dad.
Right.
Just, walked through everything, told you what we do.
Right. For sure.
The funny thing is like, if you had to take what you now know about just the whole business, right? And when I say the whole business, I mean the business of just baseball. And you were talking to a kid who is going through the process of choosing an advisor. Like, what is the advice that you would give that player on what they should look for, what you think is important?
For me, the big thing is communication and trust. And obviously at that early of an age, you're definitely leaning on your parents to fill that out, and someone that you can rely on. And that's what you guys have. Like I said, I tell everybody, I feel like I'm so lucky to have you guys, because I know it's not always like that. And I think, you guys' motto is player first, that mentality of, and, we've talked about it as we've gone through, the whole process of, when I first got drafted to, when I first made my debut, to arbitration, to
signing the contract.
It's like, you guys not necessarily making the decision for me, but presenting me with the most knowledge that you guys can, and then letting, me and my, family decide for ourselves. Like I said, and that's what I think gets lost in the whole agency advisor standpoint. It's like, not being told, but like I said, being presented that information that we need to let us evaluate and form an opinion, and that alone comes with trust, and that's what, like I said, that's what I would tell guys is look at it that way, not versus, is this guy the biggest agent out there? Is he, what kind of reputation does he have? Like, more or less of just like the person that he is, and how personal he is, and the knowledge, and he's truly looking out for you,
right?
Versus, the whole other side of it.
One of the things I've said, which I think we've probably talked about, is for some odd reason, I think agents apply a strategy towards this business where it's like a sales business,
for sure.
Right? Like they're a car salesman, we'll say, right? And they want to paint this picture. And that's where I think sometimes these families, when they're meeting with agents, they're receiving this message and it's like, man, everybody sounds the same. Well, yeah, the reason they all sound the same is because they're all selling whatever product they're presenting. And guess what? Their product is the same. So of course, it's like you went to an Audi dealership, then you go to a Mercedes dealership, then you go to a BMW. And it's like, it all is exactly the same. And so I've always said, to understand how best to choose your agent or advisor, you need to recognize this is not a sales business. This is a service business. And our job is to work for you and to serve your needs. And so if you understand that, that is how we do everything, right? And that's really what I've tried to lean forward with. And even we'll talk about the big contract that you signed. But going through that, I was so focused on, I need to make sure that you have all of the information so that you have peace of mind when making this decision. If you choose to take a number or if you choose to turn it down, know what you're turning down, know what you're taking, know what the risks are involved. Like, that is what you need to know. I'm here to tell you what I think you should do, but I'm not here to tell you you have to do this, or, oh, by the way, I'm letting you know we turned that deal down that I didn't even tell you about yet, which happens a lot too.
Well, yeah, I've heard it a ton. And like I said, you guys have never done that, which I'm very thankful for.
Yeah. So let's now talk about college. Okay. So we've gotten a little bit of a insight into when things started. So freshman year going into sophomore year, things start picking up. Obviously, you ended up committing to Mississippi State as a catcher. What other schools reached out?
So I've talked to Arkansas just a few times on the phone, never visited. Actually went to LSU, spoke with them. That was like my number 2.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was a little far for me. Which, like I said, I've always, like, Mississippi State was like number 1, pretty high up. Talked to a little bit with Ole Miss, but I may have gotten disowned.
If
I went to Ole Miss.
That would crush your dad.
Yeah, but no, that was really it. I kind of knew that my heart was at Mississippi State. I knew I wanted to stay in the South. Like I said, I committed my sophomore year. I think the day before Christmas, me and Keegan, my cousin, both committed at the same time. It was a pretty easy. Like I said, I knew I wanted to go to Mississippi State.
So they committed you though as a catcher?
Yes.
Only?
Catcher only.
Okay. And then when you obviously transitioned.
Started to pitch.
What was their take on that?
Then it was like, hey, I was playing infield. I was starting to swing it. They were like, look, you could do two-way.
Okay.
And do more as a pitcher, infielder, hitter. So that's where.
So they were on board with that too?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So that's how that all went down. And I still remember my official visit, going there. I wasn't a crazy partier. We actually hung out in the Palmero Center and kicked footballs and threw that around on my official visit. We didn't go to a party or anything. So it's kind of.
Do you remember having conversations with the coaching staff about the offer they made?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty.
Was this an overwhelming thing for you to have to be a part of? Like, was it confusing?
No, I think the draft itself was more overwhelming than the actual, like, committing to Mississippi State. Because, like I said, I think the Mississippi, like, college was like my first idea of before I wanted to, like, I never like saw myself getting drafted out of high school, I don't think. So
I'm aware because we've talked about this. Yeah.
So I knew that, like I said, I wanted to go to Mississippi State.
I was only asking if the discussions around the scholarship were overwhelming, because I think a lot of times parents go, and even the player go into it and, what questions should we ask? How does this typically go?
Right. No, it was pretty much like what I remember was, just going there. I did a camp there. And then, the phone calls like with them where I had to call them, and then they offered a full ride. So I mean, like I said, it was
makes
pretty
it easy.
It does.
Yeah.
Like you said, very fortunate. So like I said, it really wasn't just a whole lot of like complication. I think the biggest thing was the other schools, when I would talk to them while I was going through the process, because I knew my heart was at Mississippi State, because they are obviously trying to get stuff out of me. And
you felt like you were cheating on them.
Yes. So that was like probably the hardest thing, is just like more or less like trying to beat around the bush of, yes, I'm interested.
You're not trying to lead them on and make
100%, because then you gotta, once you commit to Mississippi State, then I had to call those other coaches, and me as well as anybody. It's like, I hate telling people bad news.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably the most challenging thing for me.
I think a lot of players would empathize with that. I mean, any human being, I guess, really would, right? Like, you don't want to have to lead someone on
for sure,
and then
sure
let them down at some point, knowing that that's not what's going to happen.
But at the same time, they go through it and they understand it's part of the game.
It's a business, and this happens.
Yeah, it's part of growing up.
So I'm interested. You actually may not know this. So the NCAA recently changed a rule where kids cannot be contacted by schools until August 1 of their junior season.
Really?
Yeah. So
what I committed to Mississippi State is no longer a thing.
That's right. You couldn't have committed that early to a Division I.
Really?
Division II, it's actually almost a year before. It's June, I think 15th of your sophomore season is when you could first have contact. So assume for a second that this rule was in place. Do you think your decision to go to Mississippi State could have been different a year later? I recognize that was a trick question, because there's no world in which Austin Riley was going to say, I probably would have ended up at LSU.
That was the only other place I probably would have ended up. It was LSU, but it was 6 hours and homebody. Like, it was just not it. Do you know why they made that rule?
Yeah. So they actually said, and I feel like the new rule was established to combat the rise in early recruiting and give student athletes time to focus on their development without added pressure from college coaches. But what's interesting about that is this rule is only for D1. So like, D2 is different, and D3 is even more relaxed. D3, it's basically
to give them like the D2, D3 a little bit more to be able to like get their.
I mean, I guess my personal opinion of this rule is I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Let kids continue to develop.
Yeah.
Right. We've all seen it where a kid, commits as a freshman and then come junior year decommits and wants to now go somewhere else. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to give them more time to develop. But we'll have to wait and see. I think, like anything, analyze how it plays out. Right. And let's just make sure that this was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Question that I have, if you look at the percentages of guys that get to the big leagues, those guys who go to college have a higher likelihood that they'll make it to the big leagues more so than high school. Knowing that, why would you think that is?
I think it's developing better coaching, better skills from, like I said,
better coaching in college.
Yeah, just I think it's you learn you're on your own. You don't have your parents. Like I said, you start to learn your body more, and like I said, obviously you go to a D1, you obviously got better coaching. I think the tools and resources that you have there are
better coaches in college than high school, you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. So I think you're just like, and then at that point, you make from 15, 16, 17, 18 to 19, 20, 21, like you make a pretty big jump physically, maturity, that level. And then I think, like you said, you're able to hone in on your skills and kind of take off. So I think that could be a reason. I'm like I said, I mean, talking.
I personally, I agree with you. I think, to me, it's no different than a player who's in AA compared to a player who, let's say, a senior in high school. Right. It's like the player who's in AA is more advanced.
Right.
A player who's in college is naturally going to be more advanced than a kid in high school. So a scout going to the game and watching that player, you're going to have a more cleaner look on really who this kid could become. Not to mention, they're 3 years older. at a really young age.
And
right?
the competition's a lot better.
And the competition is better. And if that player is performing better against better competition.
I think it's better from a team side. Like it's more like reassuring to them. Like, okay, when they make a decision on that player, it's like they kind of know what they're getting.
Yeah. The way I would describe it is like their misses are smaller. People want to say, oh, the likelihood is greater. Their misses are smaller. So if they're going to take a first rounder, they're probably not going to miss on a guy to college.
No doubt.
Right. I would agree with you.
I'm so glad I didn't go to college though. Just throwing that out there.
Which, let's talk about that for a second, because going through this process, I remember, and we'll get into more of the specifics as far as like, what did you do going into the draft? But I remember you being almost convinced you're going to college.
Yeah.
Right. And so what had to happen for you to then realize that's not really the path I want to take?
For me, I think because I was such a homebody, I didn't want to leave home, like just like not knowing what to expect in pro ball. And for me, I remember conversations we had with you. It was just like, if it's life-changing money, then it was kind of like, you'd be smart to take that and take that chance. And looking back now is the best thing I ever did, because we backed out of, I knew I didn't want to pitch. I think we backed out of the draft as a pitcher, position player only. And was, fortunate the Braves took a chance. But I think, looking back now, it was the best thing for me, because I think I would have gone to Mississippi State. I would have pitched. I'm almost certain I would have had some sort of arm injury.
Right.
And you just, at that point, you never know. Do I get enough playing time?
Sure.
Because my arm barked all the time. I remember scouts texting me, a few times when my velo wasn't up, in high school.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? I'm like putting my butt on the line for you. I just knew in my gut, if I was going to take this chance, it was going to be a position player. And like I said, luckily it turned out pretty.
Well, so you said a couple of things that are interesting. One, you said when you were making the decision on whether to sign or not, when life-changing money presented itself, and I want to make sure that everybody listening understands the reason life-changing money, whatever that number is for any person, it could be different, but the reason that is important is it's what that money represents to that organization.
Yeah.
So the money that represents to the organization is, if you sign for millions and millions of dollars, that team needs to give you every opportunity to develop,
for sure,
to then become this superstar they think you can become.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the smaller that number becomes, the less guarantee it is that they're going to really give you that chance.
For sure. No doubt.
So that's one of the important things. You said something else, which I thought was important. You were a two-way guy in high school, rather.
Right.
We knew, because you had been honest with me at some point, like, hey, I like doing this more. And I remember asking you the question, you do both. Honestly, like, we've got 15 teams that like you as a pitcher, and we've got 15 teams that like you as a hitter. So like, you could really go into this thing and keep it wide open and do both. And I remember asking you, what do you identify with? Like, when you think about yourself being in the big leagues, what do you see? And I remember you telling me a hitter, and it was very clear, and it was very like matter of fact. And so we spoke about it, and I said, well, I don't want to necessarily let on yet to teams, because we know you're going to pitch the rest of the season. I don't want to tell teams who like you as a pitcher that you're not going to do that, because then less scouts, less scouting directors are at the game. And we wanted to use the attention to just, create a buzz, which we did. And so it wasn't until, I think it was like a week, maybe even less before the draft, where I called all these teams and I let them know we're going out as a hitter. And I remember a handful of teams actually said to me, "You're crazy.
Oh yeah.
Austin Riley is never going to be a hitter." And I won't say the scout's name right now because I don't want to call him out, but it happened. And he's still scouting to this day. But yeah, I mean, I think that is something that a lot of these families still to this day deal with.
Oh yeah.
And maybe even more so now, because so many guys are two-way guys. These MLB organizations, and maybe it was the Shohei Ohtani effect, like a lot of these organizations are trying to give players more of a leeway to do both.
I think it's just one of those things where I knew, and like I said, my arm hurt all the time in high school. And it's just like, but I also didn't have, like, that's when like Jaeger bands were just now coming back. So it's like, all I was doing was like ice Advil.
Yeah.
So it's like, it wasn't really like I was treating my arm with the best. And I just knew that, I kind of knew in my gut that like if I was going to have a chance, and especially out of high school, it's like I needed to be a hitter.
Right. And you were smart. You knew.
Yeah. You got to trust your gut.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to talk to you about NIL.
Okay.
Okay. So NIL is something that we get asked about quite a bit. Put yourself in the kids' shoes today who actually have to deal with this whole NIL component when making decisions.
Yeah.
And just to kind of, I guess, fill in the gaps maybe for some stuff that you may not know. So a lot of these kids, when they're committing now to colleges, a component of the commitment is now NIL money that they're going to be told that they ultimately get. You're one of the most marketable athletes in the South, if not the most marketable athlete in the South. How do you evaluate money off the field related to the money that you can make on the field? Do you believe a player's focus should ever be more on the money that they're going to make off the field?
I don't think, and that's just kind of how I'm wired. You know, I think a lot of the stuff that I do off the field now has to kind of make sense with like my big picture of things, whether it's, you know, Realtree to Mizuno. Like it has to fit me personally. Like I'm not just going out there chasing dollars. I think it's got to fit me personally of what makes sense for me, my family.
Is it what you like?
Yeah, is it what I like?
Right.
Does it take me away from my family a ton? Like I'm big on, if it does that, I'm going to lean away from that. That's kind of like I said, that's kind of my feel on it. I don't really know personally a whole lot of the NLI stuff. I've read a few things online. You know, I do agree, like being able to market yourself is good at an early age. I know like from a football standpoint, it's kind of like it's gotten crazy.
Yeah.
So like I said, I don't know just a whole lot to voice too much without sounding.
Yeah. It's a very complex issue.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think what I'm interested in, and what I think a lot of the families are interested in is,
I was sorry to interrupt. I think it's more of like the thing I have a problem with NIL. It's like, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's all about exposure now versus development. And I think that's where maybe it can get lost a little bit. It's like, how much, exposure and money can I make versus like, okay, is this guy really honing in on his craft and his development to make sure he's able to perform and get better?
Well, and there's a time and a place for it. Right?
I agree. Totally.
If we compared it to being a professional before the NIL stuff was in place, there were shoe contracts. There was, all these different glove contracts and things that you would make money off of. But if you are caring more about your glove contract or your shoe contract than you were about your performance on the field, your priorities are a little out of whack.
No doubt.
And so I think it's not wrong that people are focused on NIL, because if there's money to be made, and again, this is a philosophy thing, if there's money to be made, then it's the player's right to make the decision at that time. Do I want to do what it takes to make the money?
Yeah.
If I've got to show up for an hour, it's not worth my time because I'd rather get my sleep and focus on getting ready for the game. And I think that's where the focus needs to be. It's like, what is your biggest priority? Your priority needs to be on the thing that ultimately is going to give you the life that you want.
No doubt.
Right? And
No
if
doubt.
it is taking away from you being or having the chance to be a professional baseball player, you should probably scale it back a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's where I think the analysis needs to be. And maybe, for some of these players out there, they need to kind of readjust their thinking. It's not to say NIL is bad, because it's certainly not. And it's not to say that you shouldn't worry about it. It's put it in perspective, as you said, in this bigger picture.
Yeah. No
right.
doubt.
So let's now go to the draft a little bit. Okay. We're inching our way up. We're getting close. Do you remember the events that you went to starting the summer going into your senior season?
So we went to Perfect Game, Under Armour.
Yeah, so we went to the Perfect Game National.
Right.
We went to the Under Armour, the Baseball Factory Under Armour event.
Yeah.
You went to East Coast Pro.
East Coast Pro, and then
you went to Area Codes. And then you played in the PG All-American game.
Right.
And then you played in the Under Armour Baseball Factory game.
Yeah.
As you look back on those events, do you think all of them were necessary?
No.
Okay. Which ones?
I say that. I think a lot of me says no because it was my senior summer going into your senior year.
Yeah.
I think it was just like I had played so much travel baseball and like I was traveling so much, didn't really get to have a not a life, but like a summer where I just kind of got to hang out with buddies, go to the lake. But at the same time, I always tell people, it's like, those are the type of sacrifices that I look back now that gave me that opportunity to be
Sure.
where I am now. So it's like, there's a little bit of sacrifice there. I think the biggest one that I think selfishly, but it was really good for me, was because obviously I was big my junior year. I was like,
Tell everybody how big.
I was 260. Like I was
You needed
I was
to
fat.
lose some weight. Yeah.
And going to the area code, I got there, I'm playing infield, and the scout, still, I don't know his name, but he basically called me fat. And
What team was it?
I can't remember.
Okay.
But I needed, like, that was one of the pivotal moments in like my kind of, early on in my career that kind of changed me to kind of make that move. I didn't want to hear it, but I needed to.
Right.
And ended up losing a bunch of weight. And I think that's kind of what's got me to get that more exposure from, once we got closer to the
And
draft.
what's crazy is it's not like you yo-yoed and then went back. Like, you've been pretty much the same way since that point.
Since then, yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah. So
on that front though, so now put yourself in that summer. Okay. How did you balance the demands of the summer schedule? And this is a question straight from a father of a kid who's currently going through it. So how did you balance the demands of the summer schedule with your development, recovery, strength training, and all the things that you can't forget about, but become harder when you're living out of a suitcase?
Yeah. I mean, it was tough. I think that's why I gained a lot of weight, because we were on the road so much. And so there was these Cracker Barrel cards that my mom got from a friend that worked there that basically was like a free meal, and we abused it.
Yeah.
So I think that was like, it wasn't very good. Like my recovery and diet wasn't very good. But I think, the biggest thing that I can say is sleep. You got to get good sleep.
Were you still doing the stretches at night and like
the
forearm workouts?
Not the forearm workouts, because we didn't carry around a rice bucket, but Dad was making me stretch. We even would do like ice baths in the hotel room. He'd go get, the little bucket of ice in the out of the hotel.
Good for Mike.
Yeah, and like dump it in the tub. I'd sit there. It wasn't fun, but he made me do it. So I think the biggest thing that I can tell a parent that I've kind of learned looking back now is they need to be able to guide their kid in a certain way to help them. Because I think that's what my dad did. Was there was stuff that I didn't want to do, or I wanted to do, whether I wanted to go play. Dad was always big if we had a double header that day on the road, like morning game followed by an afternoon game. Like, he made me lay down for like an hour. Like, I had to rest. Couldn't really do anything. Like, so I think like my dad was a huge factor into that, of just like understanding the process of stuff that I really didn't want to focus on, like from a recovery standpoint, but he was really good with that.
Wow, that's great. Because it was so challenging for you over the senior summer, like, how do you maintain your body now in a big league season? Like, what do you focus on now?
So for me, diet is pretty much a huge factor. Over the course of my career, I've learned what I can eat, what I can't eat, what makes me feel good, what doesn't make me feel good, which we have a great nutritionist that's helped me with that. And then 2, I'm not big on lifting. I'll lift heavy, pretty heavy during the off season, but during season, it's about maintaining mobility and flexibility. Like, those 3 things. Like, if I were to tell anybody, like from like the off, not baseball side of it, like those are like the 3 most important things for me.
So same again?
Diet, flexibility, and mobility. Like, having those 2 things has like allowed me to play every day. Like I said, just from like a standpoint of like, because you're not going to feel 100% every day, but there's little things that I can do to, prevent my hips from getting tight, my shoulders from getting tight. I can tell if I, cheat one day and eat bad, the next day I'm going to, I'm going to feel like sluggish. So it's like those things that I've had to learn along the way that has allowed me to, like I said, understand how my body works and be able to, post up every day.
I love that. Before we move on now to the minor leagues, just reflecting back last time on, just the draft process, was there any one thing that stood out or that stands out to you that you feel like is like one of the most influential things that needed to happen? And it may have been that scout telling you were fat, but something like that.
I think that was like, that one's on up there, because I was fat, like, and I needed to lose weight.
Was there a moment where something clicked, maybe that summer, where you're like, and maybe it was you facing the kid that everybody's saying this is the best guy?
Okay. He actually got drafted by us. We were playing in LaGrange, Georgia.
Okay.
Big prospect.
Who drafted the Braves? Drafted him?
Yeah, they ended up drafting him. Like, oh my gosh, this is bad.
Righty, lefty. Lefty pitcher from where?
From right around Georgia. Like I know him. This is really bad of me. So if he listens to this podcast, I promise you I'm just terrible with names. But anyway, tons of scouts there. Ended up like hitting them pretty good. I think I ended up like an opposite field double off on him. Had a really good weekend, a couple homers. I remember that being kind of like one of my big.
So
anyway,
it was facing him,
yeah,
having a good day and realizing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that was like that security that I needed to be like, okay, if I back out of the draft as a pitcher, like
you're going to be okay.
Yeah. I can handle it. It was like velo, good curveball. Like I can handle it.
And it's interesting too, because I think every player progresses through their career in a different way. Some guys naturally have the confidence where it's like, I know how good I am.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They have that belief, right? I think some players, and more likely most players, they know they're really good, but they like test the waters every level they go.
Yeah.
Right. I get the high A and it's like, all right, I'm good enough here. Get to double A. Sure. All right, I'm good enough here. And then it's more and more confidence. And there's not a better way or a worse way. It's just naturally, I think, how things progress.
Yeah.
So now, okay, let's fast forward. Now you get drafted. When you first got drafted, what was the biggest adjustment that you needed to make? Was there something that you're like, oh, I had to clean this up? I mean, to tell everybody who's listening, you started your career in the minor leagues going.
I think I was 0 for 20. I think ended up going 0 for 24 before I got my first hit with like
how many
16
Ks?
strikeouts.
16 strikeouts.
Yeah, my parents actually flew down towards the end of that before I got my first hit. I think the biggest thing that I needed to clean up was just like committing, because there was still part of me, I think that was like, especially at that point, like I should have gone to college.
Right.
I should have gone, like, what have I done? That kind of thing versus like completely buying into, okay, I'm here. Let's go. Let's make the most of it. Like, understand it's a game of failure. Failure is going to happen. Like, you got to get your feet wet. I think that was like one of the big adjustments that I got. I can still vividly remember to this day when I got that first hit and like all that weight was just like, it's gone.
Well, for people listening who don't know this, when a player is drafted, more than likely, so this player has been followed by the scouting department up until that point. Right. And now that you're drafted, now you get handed off to the player development department. But the very first partial season after you get drafted, a lot of the coaches, they're kind of hands off.
100%.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because they want to get to know your swing a little bit more before they start changing things. And so, you're out there and you're going 0 for 20 and you're striking out 16 times. I'm sure there was a part of you that was like, hey man.
Yeah. Oh,
like, where's some help?
All they were like, hey, just keep getting after it. Like, we're just going to keep, they kept putting the ball on the tee and it's like, you're just going to keep doing it.
When I remember telling you, like, do not worry about how you do. This is all about getting your body, feeling like what it feels like to play every day.
Yeah. And it's crazy. It's like, you still kind of like, still to this day, still go through it. Like a little bit. It's like when things aren't going well, it's like, you still want to try really hard when that's probably the worst thing you can do. It's just like sometimes you got to take a step back and let things come to you. And and that's what I should have done earlier.
So like going through, we'll call it, travel baseball, and then realizing, oh, you face this guy that you were mentioning, the lefty, and he's pretty good, and you have some success off him. Now you're in the minor leagues, and now you're surrounded by everybody else who was also the best kid in their area.
Yeah.
Right. More than likely a pretty good player.
Right.
How did you deal with just the mental side of feeling like, okay, now I need to show them that I'm a big leaguer?
I think it was just like how I went about my business, from, working out to my cage work to my routines, like developing a routine, like in the big league, like, or in the minor leagues, of like what that looks like. I think the biggest thing that I can tell you and I've learned is, like, when things aren't going well, and this is for guys, I think, that are in the minor leagues that are going through struggles. I don't want to put this in a certain way where it doesn't come off wrong, but it's like, the more you try and like are worried about film and stuff like that, I think the more player development worries, versus like when you're going through those tough times of like understanding that it is a game of failure, and that like stick to your routine and not necessarily change. I think that's what they want to see, versus a guy that, and I was guilty of it. It's like when I went through a slump, I was getting there, 2 hours before everybody. I was watching a ton of film. Like, they could almost see the wheels turning.
Yeah, you're almost like grasping at straws.
Yes, versus like understanding that it is a process, and that you're going to go through these failures, and how you deal with them. I think that's what they want to see more.
Yeah, they want to see a confidence and like a calmness.
Yeah, versus
a coolness under pressure. Is what they want to see.
No doubt.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, you're going through now. You're working your way up through the minor leagues, and I vividly remember this. Like, you were cruising.
Yeah.
Right. You then get to AAA, and at one point, I know you felt like, they signed Josh Donaldson. You're kind of the top prospect coming up. Play third base. They signed Josh Donaldson on a 1-year deal, and now you felt a little like almost blocked.
Yeah.
Right. And whether you said those words or not, like, I know that most players are like, okay, there's now a ceiling that there wasn't before.
Right.
How did you handle that?
I think it was, and I leaned on you a ton. It's like, I remember you telling me, is like, if you're hitting, they're going to find you a way. It's like, that's the way you got to look at it. And I think that was huge, from hearing that from you. It's because Alex asked me not long ago, he was like, were you mad when we signed Donaldson? I was like, yeah, I was mad, but I wasn't mad in a way of like, I'm just going to, be pissed off.
Yeah. Mope around about it.
It's right. Like, I've took it in a way as like, okay, now I gotta do something, to prove that I can come up there and help that club. And, ended up, Ender going down.
And you end up coming up too to play outfield.
I played 4 outfield, and that's kind of goes back to what I was telling you. Play all the positions, play everything. It's like, I was primarily, I got drafted as a third baseman and played 4 games in the outfield in the minor leagues, and then the next day I'm playing left field to make my big league debut. It's like, you just don't ever know. It's like that. I think that's what's kind of cool about it.
And again, going to the mental side of the game for a second, let's back up. You're in big league camp trying to make the team that spring training, and you have a good camp.
Yeah.
Right. You don't make the team. You go back down to AAA. We obviously spoke about what this means.
Yeah.
Hey, don't worry about it. This is all part of the business.
Right.
And I remember telling you, just go embarrass the league.
Yeah.
And you went on a tear where I think you had like 15 homers in like 40 games.
Yeah, it was something crazy.
And then you get called up, and then you have another like.
I ended up hitting 18 more.
18 more.
Yeah, because I think I had 18.
Yeah. But in a
19.
very short time.
Oh yeah, like the first like 2 weeks, I think I had like 10. Like I was on another planet.
Yeah.
And then got humbled pretty quickly after that.
But again, going through the challenges now, it's like and this is the story of just players. If you want to make this a career, right? I don't care how good you are, you're going to hit a wall.
Oh yeah.
And there was a wall that you probably hit in high school at one point, and then you overcame it and learned that you could. Then there's a wall that you hit right when you got to the minor leagues, overcame it and realized you could. And then hitting the wall in the big leagues was just more of the same.
Yeah.
It's trusting the process. And I think going back to your point about what these coaches look for, they don't want to see the wheels spinning. They want to see kind of a calm coolness under pressure.
Right.
Because they're focused on how are you going to respond like you did then when you got to the big leagues? How is that going to go?
Yeah.
Right.
No doubt. 100%.
And then something else that you had to deal with, which I don't think people truly recognize the challenge, the GM that was a part of the organization that was probably very, very, well, I know to be very influential in them drafting you, right? John Coppola is then no longer with the Braves by the time you get to the big leagues. So the GM who's now in charge of bringing you up to the big leagues is a totally different guy.
It has no ties to you.
That's right.
And they're, that's a true thing. And I think, it kind of goes back to what you said. It's like go and embarrass the league. Like go force the hand versus, just based off of. So I think like all of that kind of tied into play of once they signed Donaldson and then going into 19 getting called up. It was a good little ride.
And what's funny too is everybody looks at, if you look at your baseball reference page, right? It looks like, okay, the first season you obviously went off for that time and then didn't see a lot of playing time after that.
Right.
Then we had the 2020 season where you were the everyday guy, but it was during COVID. There was only 60 games, so it's a little bit skewed.
Yeah.
But then 2021 is like this breakout year for you.
Right.
You were top 10 in MVP, which you've remained to be every single season. What was it in 2021? Maybe it was the off season going into 2021 or even 2020. I don't want to speak for you. What was it that you felt like something changed?
So like I said, 2020 was the opening, was the everyday third baseman, didn't really hit very well. And then actually went into 2021, made the team, starting third baseman. And actually that first month was bad.
I remember.
And it had gotten to the point where I was like, in my mind, I felt like I was about to get sent down. Like I was like, this is it. I remember them pulling me in, pulling up some video, and there was obviously a little bit of like a mechanical issue that wasn't allowing me to get to pitches. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about. Like I was that guy that was like watching video 2 hours earlier. Like Snit still to this day brings up a conversation where he was like, man, I just want you to go to deer camp. Like it was like in the off season after the 2020 season. It was like, just go to deer camp and just be yourself. Who gives a crap about baseball? And it was like, I almost kind of had to have that mentality whenever I was struggling at the beginning of 2021 to almost like free myself up.
Yeah. Like put it in perspective. It's not the end of the world.
No, I was almost like not to get vulgar, but like F it mentality. It was just like, I'm either getting sent down or I'm going to, take off. And it's like, whatever happens, I can live with. But it's like, I'm going to make sure I give my 100%, physically and mentally and not like hold myself back. And I think that's what I was doing.
You watch the Masters because you're a golf fan, right?
Yeah.
Did you see what Max Homa said?
So
Max Homa, and I think, forgive me if I'm getting the dates wrong, but I believe it was either right before or right after it was right before his last round. I think it was the night before. They have like the big press conference, all the players constantly are going through. And he gave this answer, and it was basically, I don't remember what the question was, but the answer was, I just started to trust in my ability, like no matter what happens, I can't control the outcome. Right. All I can do is show up and put my best foot forward and trust that it's all going to work out how it needs to. I've put in the work. I'm just playing a game of golf, and I'm hearing the same thing from you. Like, it's not a matter of wanting it more. It's not a matter of trying more. It's not a matter of taking another 15 swings in the cage.
Yeah.
It's like a mindset shift where you have to free yourself.
You almost have to be like, okay, I'm okay with failing. Like I know I've put in the time and the effort and everything that has come before the game. It's like, okay, now I can just go play, and whatever happens, knowing that I can look at myself in the mirror and know that I've prepared. And I think you have to be okay with, I can live with that, whether I go 0 for 4 or 4 for 4.
Right.
I think that was that mentality switch that I had to have to then be able to go off. And now it's like kind of that we've, had a couple years after that. It's like when I do start to go in those slumps or whatever it may be, I'm able to kind of just like ride the wave versus like dig myself deeper and try to almost force the fix and the result versus understanding that I'm going to fail. Like it's just like we play a game of failure and being okay with that.
Right. And so you have the year in 2021. Now we're going into 2022, right? It was an odd year because it was the lockout. Right. So we're starting late. You're now arbitration eligible for the first time. We're negotiating that contract
over
during
Zoom.
the season, if you remember.
Over Zoom.
No, this is even before. This is just the negotiation. We're negotiating before as the season's going on. And the Braves end up approaching us about doing a multi-year contract and ended up making an offer of, it's public, we can talk about it, of $100 million. And I remember laughing about it a little bit because, in my professional opinion, the offer of $100 million was more about, we need to get to $100 million so that he can be convinced to take it, was kind of the thought I had of what the Braves were thinking.
Right.
And I remember talking to you and you kind of chuckled at one point and you're like, hey man, it's a lot of money.
How many years was it?
It was for 8.
8 for 100. And that's like, I kind of, like I said, go back, and that's why I'm so thankful for y'all. It's like, you never told me I couldn't take it. Like if I really wanted to, you would have, I think you would have let me, but I think that's what I love about you guys so much. It's like, you fed me so much valuable information and like never gone through it. Like I felt like I'd gone through it 3 or 4 times. How much information y'all gave me, I was comfortable enough to obviously say
turn it down. We're gonna turn it down. So, which we do, we turn it down. You then go on a tear for like, I think it was like 45 days where you were like lights out.
Yeah.
Right. It's now looking at that point like, all right, we're making the all-star team. Things are looking great. And then the Braves approach us again. And I remember telling you, so the GM calls you into his office and basically says, hey, I'm just letting you know, like, I'm going to re-engage with Matt.
Yeah. He's actually in the tunnel.
Yeah.
Right outside the clubhouse.
Right. I'm going to re-engage with Matt. Like, are you okay with that? And I remember talking to you about it. And I said, well, the other thing we could do, your call, is we can tell them we're not going to talk about it during the season. Let's get to the off season and we'd be happy to kind of have this conversation again.
Right.
And I remember you saying, no, I mean, look, this is either going to get done or it's not. I'd rather just know. And then we can move on either way.
Right.
And very quickly ended up getting to a place where the Braves were not moving any further. This was their absolute best, max bullet. And the message that they were sending to us was, this is nothing personal. Like, they love you. They want to keep you. This is why they're making this, huge commitment. But if it doesn't get it done, they're going to have to figure out how they're going to allocate these dollars. And so it's not to say that like they're trading you by any means, because they're not going to, but it would look like your time with the Braves would be over when we become a free agent. And I remember you, because at one point we turned it down.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And I remember I just sensed from you this like reluctance or this hesitancy and really struggling with the decision. And so I asked you, and I don't know if you remember this, I asked you this question. I said, well, let's play this out. Okay. Let's assume for a second, number one, you continue being this player, right? The next 3 years. Okay. So you're going to make more money as a free agent, right? We know that.
Yeah.
Now we don't know where it's going to be though.
Yeah.
So let's assume you continue on this tear. Let's talk about some of the markets that we would expect to be in. Now, this most recent free agency shows you never know for sure. Yeah. But let's assume for a second it's the bigger market. So how about the Dodgers? And I remember you're like, yeah, I mean, love LA, but like, I don't see myself signing a long deal there.
Right.
Okay. What about the Yankees? Same answer.
Yeah.
What about the Mets? Same answer. The Cubs? Same answer. And we went all around the real big markets. And there was really only one other organization, which we don't need to talk about who it was, but one other organization that you said, I would rather be in Atlanta, but if they had interest, like I could see that.
Yeah.
And they at the time had this young prospect at their base that just got to the big leagues who was going off.
Yeah.
And so I said, all right, so here's your decision. Your decision is, do you want to go out there and continue doing this? trust that it's going to happen, obviously. You know, you're now a free agent, and we have to trust that this one team is going to have the money to spend and also have the interest in 3 years after doing what you now need to do for the next 3 years. Like, that is your decision. Now go make whatever decision you want to make. And I remember you felt like at that point, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, I remember having that conversation where you felt like, okay, I feel like now I know what I need to do.
Well, it's like, and that's what, like I said, you guys are so, like, you're so good about it. It's like, just, it was overwhelming. Like, talking with Anna, like, we didn't really know what to really think about, like, because obviously it's, you know, it's so much money, and like I said, you presented that information to where, okay, like, all of a sudden it made sense. Like, you put it in like, you couldn't have put it in a better presentation to where it made sense. And then, like I said, obviously Anna and I still remember where we were. I was like, my hands were sweating, clammy, like, and like I said, it just, the opportunity and what it was presented, the situation where we're at. Anna's got family here, like, everything. It just, it just like was
it felt right.
Yeah, it felt right, and we pulled the trigger.
Well, I feel like for you too, on some level, this was almost like a legacy move, so to speak. Like, how many players have the chance to get drafted by an organization close to home with family, sign and stay with an organization their whole career, and an organization like the Braves, who is one of, if not the top two, I'd say, organizations that most players want to play with.
No doubt.
Right?
Like, it's just, the grass isn't always greener on the other side.
Right.
And you know, just super, super blessed.
You played with a lot of players. What would you say that the best players possess compared to maybe others who are really good, really talented, that maybe not all of it kind of clicks?
I'd say there's a couple things. What I've noticed in guys like Ronnie, Freddie, even Olsen, guys that are just like, they're on another level. I mean,
you're in that category, by the way, but I
don't think this is something that I struggle with, and I'm trying to get there. I think their routines never change from a hitting standpoint. Like, I remember when Freddie would come in, he'd be scuffing, like, he just didn't change. He trusted in his routine so much that he knew he was going to get out of it at some point. It was just a matter of time. And I think Ronnie does that really well. I think Olsen does that really well. I'm trying to get there.
Because you like, is it tinkering a little?
Tinker. I love to tinker. Like, I can run down a rabbit hole on swings really, really quick. And I think they do that really well. And I think their mental side of the game is really strong. I think they're
you mean their belief in themselves, or what do you mean mental side?
Belief in themselves, and just, like I said, understanding. I always go back to that it is a game of failure, and I think they don't ever panic. And I think that's where guys that
they trust it's coming.
They trust it's coming. I think that's like the biggest thing that I've seen. And, you know, Nick Markakis, when I played with him, Brian McCann, like, they never changed whether they were going really good or really, really bad. Like, you never saw that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one big key factor that I think is huge.
Have you noticed a difference in play? Like, so you get drafted in 2015, as these younger players start coming up, have you noticed a change in, like, the mentality a little bit?
Well, I think the game has changed a lot, especially after COVID.
In what ways?
All guys do is play video games now.
Okay.
And I think there's, you know, and the world has changed. Like, from, you know, I remember, you know, being a rookie and you know, getting some grief from some older, you know, players, but I think that was just like me understanding part of the game, and I don't think that's in the game as much anymore.
Yeah, it seems like there's not like this, like, camaraderie off the field Where like back at the hotel, guys used to
we
go
used
grab
to,
dinners.
Yeah,
and-
which I think we do a really good job of that. And I think that's why our clubhouse is really great. We're huge on team dinners. Every chance we get, we go on a team dinner.
The whole team.
A lot of us.
Or do you split up?
No,
the whole team. That's great.
I think, we had a team dinner in Philly. There was like 21 of us. Like I said, I'm very fortunate. We have a great group in our clubhouse. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but I think there is a little bit different. Just like for me personally, when I came up, like I sat in my locker and I did my routine and like I tried to stay out of everybody's way. Where I think now there's like a more of a comfort level thing, which is good, and which I think I learned a lot by just sitting in my locker and making sure my routine was right. So I don't know. It's a little tough.
I like that. Would your advice be to then a kid who, let's just say, is getting called up for the very first time? Like, what would you tell him as far as how to act in the clubhouse?
I would, because I want them to be themselves as much as possible. But I think the biggest thing that I can tell them is focus on developing a routine that works for you. Be on time.
Sure.
1000%. If you're right on time, you're late. Be 5 minutes early to everything. And like I said, I want them to be themselves, but I think there's a fine line of like coming up and making sure you have a routine that works for you and making sure you're getting your work in, staying out of the way of the veteran guys and understanding that. That aspect,
like blend in.
Yeah.
Don't stand.
And
I don't mean stand out in like a bad way necessarily, but like,
right.
This isn't your clubhouse yet.
Yeah.
So like blend in
for sure
and add value
for sure,
rather than be kind of a thorn in people's sides.
No doubt.
No doubt. I mean, I think we all, whatever career you're in or whatever sport you've played, know that one teammate where you're like, oh yeah, we know that guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it happens. Can you give everybody just a brief sneak peek into like, what is it like to play a full big league season physically?
Physically, you're going to have more days where you're 75, 80% feeling than you are 100. That's a no brainer. I think it goes back to the diet, the sleep, mobility, flexibility, that kind of thing. I've developed a routine that allows me to get in a groove. And once I get going where I'm playing every day, like it almost just kind of flows. Like we're super routine oriented. We do the same thing every day. And I think then at that point, then you kind of micromanage how your body feels that day to whether or not, I'm only going to take a couple rounds in the cage, or I'm not going to take ground balls today because my legs are feeling a little heavy. I think that's been the ebbs and flows that I've had to learn to be able to play every day.
Yeah, and that's something that
it's lost, I think.
Well, and I think no matter whether it's a player in the minor leagues, big leagues, travel ball, little league even, like what I'm hearing you say a lot is routine. And like Nick Saban would say, process, right?
Right.
It's creating this consistency
no doubt.
That the result of which will be success.
Right.
Not trying to like catch success, like it's this thing that you have to do, and then I'll just do that again tomorrow. Like it's actually being conscious of every little action that you take.
That's what I loved about Wash so much. It's like it's the attention to the details which make the big picture what you want.
Right.
And I think that's what I've kind of getting on him a little bit, been so grateful for, especially from my defensive side. It's like I was so worried about what I looked like on the field. It's like, okay, let's worry about the little things, how we can adjust those to get you there, but focus on these and that will come.
So you're married with a son and another on the way. How do you handle the commitment to baseball and the personal commitment to being a father and being a husband?
It's been challenging because I love Easton to death. I love Anna to death. And early on, it's tougher now that he's 2 now. He's getting older. He's understanding.
Like daddy's gone.
And you saw it before the podcast. It's like whenever I walked out the door, it's
he wants to hang.
Yeah, no doubt. So I think like last year wasn't so bad because, like I said, he was still super young, didn't quite understand. The biggest thing was like for Anna, she's basically a single parent half the year, or even more, just because, like I said, we're on the road so much. So I think balancing that has been really tough. Of just like when I'm gone, very thankful for FaceTime. Just being able to talk because he's able to understand a little bit that. And just like it's all about like sacrifices. I'm trying to make a living so they can have the best life that they can.
Right.
And it hurts me sometimes, but I know that hopefully I can later in life when he's older and he kind of looks back and understands kind of what Anna and I did for him, he can have that appreciation.
When you're telling him to stretch and do his rice bucket.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
I'm sure on some level too, it's maybe made some of the struggles in the big leagues easier on many levels, but just leaving the field and then coming back home to them.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's like,
no doubt.
Even if you wanted to think about the game, it's probably impossible.
No, it's like, especially coming off the road, whether especially if I have a bad like road series, like coming in and walking through the door and the first thing he says is dad, screams and starts running. And then, obviously, missing Anna, it's like that makes it better for sure. It's the best.
As we wrap up here, I got just a couple more things I kind of wanted to talk to you about. Most players today, in my experience, I feel like there's so much attention around, and this is really any youth sport, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, whatever. There's so much money in professional sports now.
Yeah.
Right. And whether it's that combined with the fame of like social media, but you have arguably achieved the thing that all of these players ultimately want, right? You not only were a first round pick, you got to the big leagues, you stayed in the big leagues, you signed for life-changing money, and now you're like living this dream. Do you feel different? Like, how has your life changed since all of those, I guess, since you've signed the contract?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, I try not to change. I've tried to make a point that was like not going to be the one thing. Like if I ever did, get them, I was always going to be the same. And like people have asked, it's like, oh, you probably, go to these fancy restaurants. No, I still go eat the same Mexican restaurant at home. Like I stick to, cause I don't like to change. Like I'm Alston, like I'm the same. All I want to do is play baseball, hang out with my family and hunt. Like that's all I want in life. And I think that's,
have you noticed a change in people? Like, have people treated you different since you signed for the big money?
Not really. I don't allow it.
Yeah.
If you do, I like to keep my circle small. I'm gonna cut you out. I like to keep my people close and have the same goals and ideas. And I think that's, like I said, I think that's the only way you can be in life is just, be yourself. You can't take that stuff to the grave.
Right. It's true.
You can't. So, I mean, it's like, why worry about it? Just like I said, I'm Austin. Just be yourself.
No. And I will tell you, and I mean it, like, so, Albert Pujols, who you now know, who was one of the guys we represented. Albert was kind of that first guy where I saw, oh, you're the same exact human being as you've always been. And now that I look and I see that you are the same exact human being that you've always been, it's amazing. It really is. It truly is. All right. So now I got just a couple fun things and then one serious question. Who's a pitcher that you don't like facing?
It's a new one. It's like here recent. Justin Steele. He is funky. It's a lefty. Like I feel like I see lefties good. He's an uncomfortable at bat. So yeah, he's like not overpowering velo, but it's just like what it comes out of, where he hides it. It's just, it's weird.
Well, and it's funny, you talk to a different player and they may see Justin Steele really good.
I know. It's like,
and somebody that you don't see good or see good, rather, they don't see good.
No,
so
it's crazy.
It's happened before. Who do you think the best player in the big leagues is today?
Shohei. I mean, I think that's, I mean, just obviously he's got the injury right now, but what he was doing before the injury, I mean, that's just not common.
No, not at all. There's a reason why he has been this player that's totally just transformed the game of baseball on so
100%.
many levels.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's impressive. All right. Lastly, so take us to the end of your career. Okay. You have achieved everything that you've ever wanted in the game of baseball.
Okay.
What does the baseball community say about what Austin Riley has done to the game?
I want to be known for somebody that's been a great teammate, helped my team win a World Series, and just to me, be the ultimate professional on and off the field. I think I love to use the word, be professional. And I think that's kind of what I try to model my game with is respect the game. He was there for his teammates and he competed his butt off.
I love that.
Awesome.
Bang.
Good stuff, baby.
Yes, sir.
All right, man.